Here we are again, Interact 2022 Day 2, an event with, proposed by AEB Europe, which aims to, as you know, lead political representation across Europe and to promote industry collaboration, which they're doing, gathering us here. I had a pleasure to meet with some Croatian people, Bulgarian people, Dutch people, people from the Netherlands, from Spain even, yesterday at night. So I hope you did do so and enjoy the first day of Interact as much as I had. For those who are just joining us for the first day, yesterday we took a deep dive into a lot of hot topics. We discovered the results of the edX Benchmark 2021. We discussed subjects like the opportunity of CTV, the exponential growth of retail media, the future of metaverse, the way organizations should react in case of crisis, thanks to the moving testimonial of Anastasia from CEO of AAB Ukraine. So today, for the second day, with our central theme of diving into the next digital decade, we are going to go further with different topics. We are going to talk about a crucial one, which is the business model for premium publisher. We are going to talk about artificial intelligence in English. We are going to talk about the evolving of TCF. And I propose you to stay focused and to switch your phone into silent mode so we can keep our full attention on today's speakers. I already thank them for coming and for sharing their knowledge, their point of view at this time. Without further ado, I would like to take maybe the clicker and to introduce our very first speaker today, not without mentioning our sponsors, of course. And today we are going to open the second day of Interact with Constantin Kamaras. Please welcome him with a strong applause.
Merci.
Merci, Constantin.
And thank you very much, Charlotte, for guiding us through yesterday in quite a long program and also for today. So thank you so much. Why? A lot of you turned up. You know, the stage fright inside me hoped that I would be addressing an empty room, but there you have it. Well, when we were working on the Interact program a few months back, we decided that we need to put some special emphasis on the premium publisher advertising business model. Why? Not only because premium publishers are very much a cornerstone of our membership, and when I say our membership, I do not mean only IAB Europe, I mean all its constituent national IABs across Europe. But also, if anything, the last 2 years or more have demonstrated in the most emphatic manner the crucial role that premium news brands play not only in the market, but in societies as a whole, in terms of keeping readers citizens, that is, well informed about what is happening in the country, in their country, or in the planet. So this is a crucial time to re-examine and discuss anew the business model. Now, we all know about the amazing success those premium news brands have had with subscription initiatives, and we very much applaud that, but they're also vital pillars of the online advertising ecosystem. And we're delighted to have today with us both the great keynote speaker and panelists to discuss this in greater detail. But without further ado, permit me to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. It's Anthony Crocker, the head of commercial success at the Digital Innovation Hub of the Telegraph, a premium news brand, if there's one across Europe. So, Anthony, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'll get straight into it because I'm sure the hangovers are going to kick in soon. So for the Telegraph, our kind of transformation with our approach to advertising really started with the overall strategy moving towards a subscription strategy and away from an ad-first funded model. So what that meant for us was kind of rethinking the way that we approach our editorial. So moving away from looking at kind of clickbaity headlines that help drive traffic and scale, which had been part of the success previously, but moving to more complex metrics in terms of measuring success for our editorial. Obviously, that does include engagement and where we're driving traffic, but it now also crucially looks at driving things like subscriptions, and then engagement through and retention through kind of quality metrics like dwell. In terms of what that meant kind of physically, it meant a complete overhaul of all of our products. So from a website perspective, that meant doing things like stripping out code, taking away some of the intrusive formats, advertising formats that we'd relied on previously, and making sure that the editorial and the kind of quality journalism was front and center of everybody's experience. But it also meant looking at all of our products overall and a real consolidation of the data that sits behind all of our products. So making sure there was kind of one single login for every kind of product that we had, whether that be the newsletter, podcast, or the website, and making sure that we could really make kind of full use of that data. So the first thing to kind of focus on there really, and kind of full disclosure, the data side of the business is not my speciality, but I can't really stand up here and not talk about the impact that had on our data proposition. We are now exclusively a first-party data advertising offering. We were one of the first news brands globally to do that. And that really came from our focus on that kind of logged-in experience. So our ambition was always to get 1 million subscribers by 2023 and 10 million registered users, and we're well on our way to achieving that. And obviously that gives us a host of really rich first-party data. And we're really keen to look at how we can utilize that kind of effectively and responsibly from an advertising perspective. And key to that for us really is looking at other organizations that have an equal amount of rich first-party data and how we can work with them directly, not just on things like data matching for targeting and modeling, but actually to drive insights. So one of the things that we're really focused on moving forward is looking at actually how we can use that data matching as a more sophisticated attribution model, not relying on pixels and clicks that sort of really only give you part of the story. Actually, we're really interested in looking at how we can work long-term on a partnership perspective with other people that have first-party data and really generate kind of meaningful insights about not what's just happened off the immediate exposure of an advertising campaign, but actually what happens 6 months and a year down the line. And the other good thing is that, obviously, it works. We know that it works. So all of the metrics that we use to sort of look at how effective our first-party data was, how accurate it was, and kind of what impact it had from an advertising perspective, demonstrated that it was incredibly useful. So obviously, we can use those profiles to build out things like seekers, profiles, interests, retargeting, and obviously modeling. But when we looked at the attention that those audience, that targeting was delivering, it was significantly higher than obviously run-of-site activity, but crucially higher than the third-party insights and targeting that we'd relied on previously. So, you know, it's fantastic for us to be able to demonstrate to our kind of clients that that really does work. So now I want to go on a little bit to actually the metrics that we use to demonstrate that it worked. And this is where it kind of come into my area of expertise. So we really quickly realized when we started looking at the subscription model that actually a lot of the metrics that we'd relied on previously just did not demonstrate the value that a premium publishing environment can deliver. And actually, if you think about things like click and in-view, they're quite often used without context, without any kind of real understanding of how those kind of really impressive metrics have been driven from. And crucially, they're quite often attributed to kind of quite intrusive, really invasive ad formats. So especially from a programmatic perspective, we quite often see clients pushing budgets towards areas that they think are performing particularly well, but actually from a brand impact perspective, they're probably doing, quite a lot of damage. And we wanted to demonstrate the value of our quality environment. So we did a lot of research with our contributors panel and asked them a lot of questions. And very quickly we realized one thing, that the trust level that our readers had, not just for the Telegraph, but other premium publisher environments, was through the roof, and especially compared to other digital platforms. 85% of our readers confirmed that the Telegraph was much more likely to contain advertising from reputable brands than not. And actually, if you look at some of the other kind of bigger platforms, I won't name any names here, but actually they demonstrated that they were likely to consider those platforms much more likely to not have advertising from reputable brands. So there's a clear difference there. But the other thing that was quite crucial from my point of view was the fact that we saw there was an alignment with values. And there's external research, such as the true cost of decepting advertising report that Digiday produced a couple of years ago, which demonstrate that actually when you choose a publisher brand that's aligned to your values, that has a massive impact on the way that people perceive your brand. And crucially, if you don't do that, then it can have a detrimental impact on your brand. So from a Telegraph perspective, we like to think of ourselves as a quality kind of brand with heritage that people come to as a credible source of news. And actually, if you're a brand that kind of aligns to those values, you're absolutely the right environment for us, we are the right environment for you to appear in. And obviously, if you've got a brand that's kind of looking to be cutting edge or kind of, cool, then there's going to be other brands out there that drive those kind of, and those attributes. But the other thing that was really crucial was that our subscribers demonstrated that actually they completely are fine with advertising as long as it isn't intrusive to their kind of content experience. And you're more likely to have a really positive reaction to the advertising when it's relevant and aligned, non-intrusive, when you have a really strong affinity to the publisher brand as well. So what we saw was for those that are more engaged in the Telegraph and are more bought into the Telegraph as a brand, when they see brands in that environment as well, there's sort of a rub-on effect for those brands as well. So we wanted to look at how we could encourage the industry to think a bit differently about the way that they approach metrics and the way that they demonstrated kind of success in their campaigning. We came out with the Metrics That Matter program, and to give you a really brief overview of what that does, it kind of splits our reporting and our optimization into three key areas. The first is brand safety. So it's really, really crucial to us to build reassurances, especially if we're in a hard news environment, to demonstrate brand suitability, to demonstrate that we're delivering those ads in a responsible way. So, it's looking at things like kind of non-intrusive formats, making sure that we're kind of applying proper stringent brand safety protocols, which obviously we do, but crucially also demonstrating the quality of our environment. So we work quite closely with Moat Oracle in that, and recently they've come up with some really fantastic tools to help us measure that. So for example, they have a tool that measures the words on a page and looks for how complex the language is, how often it's repeated, is there any spelling mistakes, and then it also does a kind of quick search online to see if there's any plagiarism or if that copy is actually coming up anywhere else. And that helps us put a number on exactly kind of how high level quality our journalism is. The second part of that is the brand attention. So obviously, we've been using things like in-view rate and click for years now to kind of demonstrate that level of attention, but it's a little bit more complex than that. So, and actually, like I just said previously, you can end up going into some kind of quite intrusive formats if you're just focusing on that without context. But we also look at things like average in-view rate. We look at things like hover rate and attention quality, again, provided by Moat Oracle, to demonstrate that actually, you don't have to be intrusive in order to be relevant and drive proper attention quality. And the final part of the Metrics That Matter program is brand impact. So we work with a company called Brand Metrics. They work with the majority of quality publishers in the UK and across Europe. And that allows us to retarget those that have been exposed to a campaign and ask them a few simple questions that help us demonstrate where we've delivered some key brand impacts in increased awareness, consideration, preference, and also their action intent towards that brand as a result of exposure. So just kind of giving you a quick overview, when we talk about what we've done to the site to kind of put the advertising front and center and make sure that the journalism front and center, and make sure the advertising shares that space in a responsible way. These are kind of the key things that the rules that we apply to our advertising to make sure that we're doing that. So the content renders first. That's absolutely crucial. We don't make the reader wait to see the thing that they're to see in the first place. The content doesn't move around. The ad space is clearly defined. So we have a kind of, if you go onto the website, you'll see there's the grey boxes load before the ads load. So even if the ad load is a bit slow because it's rich media, it's not kind of moving around when you're halfway through reading an article. There's no overlays and the ad space is clearly defined. That was something that in all of our research came out on top, that people really wanted to make sure that they understood that I'm reading the journalism that I was here to see, and now I'm looking at an ad, and they're two very distinct and separate things. But the crucial thing there, and this is certainly from an attention quality perspective, is that we have one ad per screen. And we know from all of the research that actually, especially if you go over 2 ads per screen, none of those ads are getting any attention whatsoever. And I think this is a really important thing to think about, because a lot of the metrics that we use concentrate on what's going on inside the ad frame and don't really consider what's happening outside of the ad frame. So your ad might be 100% in view for 30 seconds, and that's fantastic, and you're thinking, great, we're really delivering that. But actually, are you aware of how many other ads are on that screen, and what brands are they? Are they kind of contradicting your brand message, for example? So the next thing I wanted to talk about was a program that kind of evolved from Metrics That Matter, and that's called Stories That Matter. And going back to what Konstantin referenced just now, obviously with COVID and also with kind of crises like the Ukraine invasion, we know that sometimes advertisers can get quite nervous about appearing against hard news that they might consider slightly sensitive. But obviously, post-COVID, we saw a lot of research that helped demonstrate that, there was just way too much of a broad stroke attitude towards that blocking. And actually, especially from a COVID perspective, there was quite a lot of coverage that was kind of really positive coverage, kind of useful, helpful information. But because people were simply blocking the word COVID, that wasn't getting through. And from a quality perspective, that costs money. Even with a fantastic subscription strategy, we're still entirely kind of relying on additional revenue through advertising to help fund that journalism. We aren't just kind of syndicating from press releases here, where we've got journalists, investigators that are actually kind of, it takes time and a good deal of money to make sure that that's done in a responsible and professional way. So we approach this by looking at how we can help encourage people to kind of look at hard news as a really good opportunity. We know from research such as the Newsworks Hard News Project that actually advertisers that appear in that environment when it's brand safe kind of really benefit from higher levels of recall. And neuroscience kind of research shows that actually that's because people are in a lean-in mindset. When they're reading the news, they're really kind of concentrating on what they're reading. They're taking that information in a way, in a certain level. And so advertising that shares that space responsibly really benefits from that, and kind of in terms of people being able to process that messaging. And in fact, actually, our research showed that 86% of our readers come to us before they for news and get up to date on the news before they move on to passion points and kind of more cultural things. So we sort of call that the dinner and the dessert phenomenon, where people feel like they have to be up to date and informed of what's going on in the world before they can move on to their sort of personal passions. So in order to encourage that, we looked at demonstrating that we really understand our content. We've got some incredibly sophisticated tools around context in place that help us kind of show that actually we really know the difference between breaking news, for example, and agenda-setting news. And we split our content into 4 pillars. So we've got those 2 on the left, and then on the right we have big events and the best in life. And actually, they're the areas that advertisers come to us and say, that's what we really want to tap into, that's what we want to be a part of. But the reality is the two on the left, the breaking news and the agenda setting news, they're actually our core product. We're a news brand first and foremost. That's why people subscribe. That's why they come back to us on a daily basis to get up to date and read the news. And if people talk, if you mention the Telegraph, the first thing they think about is the news. So we looked at splitting that out into two areas, crucially because we wanted to demonstrate that we understood the difference between breaking news and the fact that quite often that is not an appropriate place for brands to be sat. But actually then that leaves a whole other kind of core product, our agenda setting news. And that is kind of rich journalism, completely brand safe, really on topic, really kind of, it's not just the sort of what's happening, it's the why it's happening, what's going to happen next. It's really crucial information to our readers. And crucially, it's a really fantastic space for advertisers to sit. So we're going to move on from this in a moment, but I just wanted to give you one quick example of the opportunity and the scale there. So around the time of COP26, we did a bit of research to look at exactly where our content was sitting. We had a lot of advertisers coming to us and saying that they wanted to tap into environment content and that they wanted to sit around things around sustainability because it was relevant to their messaging of their campaign. And they came to us and said, fine, we want to sit on your environment channel, and then let's even open that up to keyword targeting for environment, sustainability, etc. But we don't want to sit on politics, and we don't want to sit on news. But the reality is that the environment and sustainability impacts every single aspect of our life, and that then sits across all of our content. It's not a siloed subject, and especially around the time of COP26, the vast majority of relevant topical environment content was sitting either in our politics section or in our news section. And in fact, at the time, 94% of our brand safe environment content was actually sitting outside of our environment channel. And that was, driving really fantastic metrics from an attention perspective, from an engagement perspective, and yet people were just not willing to take up that opportunity. So we put this package together, we put a lot of work into it to kind of build out those reassurances and demonstrate that we have a lot of controls in place, that ultimately, as a subscription business, we always put our reader first. And I'm really pleased to kind of confirm that we successfully sold that package to an energy provider that looked at tapping into the cost of living crisis and the kind of the impact on the energy bills as a result of Ukraine invasion, and specifically the kind of the supply of fuel from Russia. And it was fantastic for us to be able to not only put a responsible, relevant brand in that place, that they really bought into the idea that it was crucial for a sustainable energy brand to be in that space, but it means that we're driving advertising funding to where it needs to be seen the most on that crucial content. So I'm just going to finish up by talking a little bit about attention, which is a bit of a buzzword at the moment. It feels like the energy and the kind of conversations around the industry has moved away from CTR, which is fantastic. We've always wanted to drive people away from using CTR as a kind of uncontextualized proxy for success. And we're moving towards attention, which is fantastic, but we just need to be mindful that actually it's incredibly easy for us to make the same mistakes that we made with CTR with attention. And then if we're looking at certain attention metrics without context, without fully understanding or demonstrating that's driving positive, meaningful engagement, then we're just doing the same thing. We're using those intrusive formats. And the reason that I've got this picture here, which, sorry if you're a little bit delicate this morning after too much wine, I'm sure that's a sensitive picture. But the idea is that if we went onto the street right now and there was somebody stood in the middle of the street screaming, they would absolutely have 100% of our attention. But would that be positive attention? No. So I just wanted to take a few slides to demonstrate how we use the Metrics That Matter program to help demonstrate not only are we delivering high levels of attention, but that attention is both quality and meaningful and positive. So here's a case study for Camelot that we ran during the time of the Olympics and Paralympics. They were really keen to demonstrate that people understood the message that by buying a lottery ticket, they were helping to fund good causes, specifically the Olympics and Paralympics. We were able to kind of prove that we kind of delivered that quality and optimized towards that quality with our attention metrics. And apologies, it's kind of not rendered particularly well on the screen. We were also able to really demonstrate that we'd delivered some brand impact there. So we'd driven up really high levels of awareness, consideration, preference, and action intent. But crucially, we asked some additional questions as part of our post-campaign research, and we asked people to let us know if they agreed with some certain statements, including they agreed that the National Lottery is making Britain better, the lottery has a positive impact on lives, etc., etc. And it was fantastic to see that in all cases, over half of the audience were happy to agree that that was, a true statement. And in a cynical world, I'm sure kind of qualitative research that we've all done in the past, people can be quite cynical and not necessarily quick to agree with statements like this. So it's fantastic for us to demonstrate that this audience really understood the message and bought into it. So we use all the learnings that we have to feed into everything that we've got, and that helps us kind of deliver best practice. So we've got awareness, consideration, preference, and action intent coming up here as kind of above benchmark, but specifically action intent is delivered really, really well. And we're kind of often seen as a brand platform, and that's kind of fair enough, but actually it's interesting to see that we've got that action intent level. And what we found was that campaigns that are kind of willing to have sustained levels of exposure over time just continue to grow that level. So to finish off, independent studies through brand metrics show that the optimum exposure level for a campaign is actually between 7 and 11 impressions, which is really interesting. And I think the message here that I really want to put out to market is if you're dealing with publishers that are delivering your campaigns in a responsible way, they're not kind of forcing those exposures onto people and being intrusive, then some of the more sensitive exposure kind of caps and frequency caps that you put on your campaigns are just not required. And actually, you're potentially missing out on a massive opportunity to just continuously grow that engagement and that affinity towards your brand. And that's it. Thank you very much.